And here we go. We are on video V38, and in this one we're going to focus on female reproduction as our main topic. And like we did with males, we'll focus on some basic anatomy, and then we'll look at the production of the gamete. Let me show up. So here I am. How you doing? Hey. For the female reproductive anatomy, let's look at, as we did with the males, at some basic features, including the gonads and where we actually have the meeting of the sperm and egg. So the ovary, like we saw in males for the testis, the ovary is the female gonads. That is, it's going to be the site where the egg, technically the oocyte, the egg to be, is going to be developed. The oviduct is going to be, and I'll draw it out here, this is the tube that's going to lead from the ovary to the uterus. It's within the oviduct, and the old term is fallopian tube, so if you know that term, you're okay. But it's within this tube that the sperm is actually going to meet up with the egg. If there's fertilization, then the uterus is going to be the site where the fertilized egg, which will be developing and developing, is actually going to implant in the lining of the uterus. And we'll look at that in just a moment. The cervix is not listed on this slide, but the cervix is right here. It's the opening from the vagina into the uterus. And let me remove some stuff here. The vagina is also known as the birth canal. This is where the penis is going to be, obviously, during intercourse. It's also going to be the birth canal. That is, the baby is going to pass through from the uterus, through the cervix, through the vagina. And finally, the vulva refers to the external anatomy of the female. So if you've heard of the terms, and they're kind of covering up here, but if you've heard of the terms labia minora and labia majora, basically flaps of tissue that protect the opening of the vagina, then that's what's listed here. Over here, it's a little hard to see, it's this little purple structure. This is the clitoris. The clitoris is what we associate with the female orgasm. So all the structures here, again, have a role in terms of either facilitating the meeting of the sperm and egg, or the production, in this case, of the egg. So an egg is a haploid cell. Remember, we saw this with the sperm, that it was a haploid cell. We went from the total of 46 chromosomes, and again, these 46 chromosomes represented the chromosomes that, in the case of the male, he got from his mom and his dad. Same thing is going to happen here. We're not going to get to all the details of this because it gets fairly involved. But if you look at these structures here, we have two kind of pieces to it. We have the outer piece, and then we have this little inner piece right here. This outer piece is referred to as the follicle, and the inner piece here is the oocyte. That is going to be eventually an egg. So what happens during each cycle that a female goes through is she's going to mature some secondary oocytes. One of them is actually going to mature all the way and burst halfway through her cycle. This is known as ovulation, and it's going to release what's called a secondary oocyte. This term egg is not really a great one to use, and it's not even really yet an ovum, which is, I guess, the Latin for egg. It's not really even that yet. The best term is it's a secondary oocyte. But it's now going to be released into the oviduct. If she has intercourse sometime about soon thereafter, within a day or so of releasing the egg, the oocyte, through ovulation, and the sperm hits up with it, that's when you're going to have fertilization. I'll just mention this because we're showing it here. This yellow structure that's left over is called the corpus luteum, and it's a temporary gland that she will use for the remainder of that cycle. It will make some hormones that are responsible for different parts of her cycle. So it's a little misleading to see it like this, like it's a big conveyor belt. It's actually not quite like that. But what happens each month is an oocyte is going to be matured and released, ovulation, again, halfway through her cycle, and we'll look at the cycles more in a moment. The remainder of that cycle is going to be taken up by the remainder of that follicle becoming a temporary gland that makes some hormones for the rest of that cycle. This is just sort of a cool picture. This is showing you ovulation, and that's showing you an oocyte being released from the ovary. Just a cool picture. I'm showing you this view just to kind of remind you again of some anatomy and some orientation here. Let me start back over here again. This part here is the ovary, and if an oocyte is ovulated and it starts working its way this direction, it's going to be heading this direction ultimately toward the uterus, but it's usually going to be somewhere in this vicinity here where a sperm, I'll just draw some little lines here, that a sperm is going to make its way into an oviduct, a fallopian tube, and meet up with the oocyte somewhere about here. Then over the next several days, there's going to be a series of cell divisions so that by the time it's about day 6 to day 7 after fertilization, then the zygote has now gone through several different kinds of cell divisions, and now it can implant right here. I can't call it a fetus. It's really not even an embryo in the perfect sense of the term. There's actually some other terms here, but let's just say the fertilized egg that's gone through multiple stages can implant in the uterine lining. If in fact it does, a hormone is going to be released by the embryo to be called HCG. If that hormone is released, then that is the signal that in fact she's pregnant. Okay, I don't want to get too theological here or philosophical here, but a fertilized egg is not a baby. A fertilized egg has the potential to implant and continue its development, but there are many fertilized eggs that actually pass through the uterus, pass through the cervix, and pass through the vagina each month, and she doesn't even know that she was quote-unquote pregnant. Technically, she's pregnant when she produces HCG from that beginning of the embryo. HCG is the hormone that is tested in the blood or the urine to indicate pregnancy. Anyway, I also want to point out here again the ovary in this view, the cervix, this narrowed part, and then the vagina. So if you were to continue further down, you would get down to the vulva down here. Okay, so that just shows you the orientation. This view actually is even a little more interesting to see to help you orient yourself. This is showing you obviously the hip bones and giving you some sense. The uterus is actually somewhat upside down, if you will. If you imagine a pear upside down, that's kind of what a uterus is like. Okay, I mentioned the cycle, and I just want to take just a second and show you what's going on with this because it is really important to how many of our contraceptives work. So I'm going to kind of walk through the parts of this here. This is showing you a 28-day cycle. Many women are on a 28-day cycle where there's going to be a series of changes in the uterus and in hormone levels, and that is her cycle for that month. They're showing you here the menstruation. This is showing you the first about 5 days of the cycle is going to be the shedding of some of the uterine lining. The thickness of this bar here is showing you the thickness of the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus. So in the first 5 days, she sheds that. And then for the next part of the cycle, all the way up to about day 28, it's going to see a progression of thickening. It's going to thicken because of a combination of hormones. FSH, estrogen, LH, and progesterone are all going to be produced, and some of them have more effects on the lining than others, but she's going to build up the lining in anticipation of getting pregnant that month. So a girl / woman, when she starts puberty, basically her body is preparing to get pregnant every single month. If there is an embryo that actually implants in the uterine lining, then that will kind of stop the process. If there is no implantation that month, she'll shed that lining, as you see over here, restart the cycle, and then prepare that month to get pregnant. A couple of things to point out here. You notice how LH and FSH, these are these hormones right here. When these hormones spike, that triggers ovulation, that triggers the release of the oocyte from the ovary. And this line here, this is progesterone. This is the hormone that we associate with the corpus luteum. This is mainly responsible for that final thickening and preparation of the uterine lining. So we'll go through the scenarios again. Let's say that there's implantation. And remember we said ovulation occurs at day 14, and when implantation occurs, about day 21, 22, 23, that's about when you're going to have maximum thickness of the uterine lining. So if that's the case, then there's going to be the production of, remember the hormone, HCG, and then now she will not shed the lining, because now there is the beginning of an embryo implanted there. So HCG will basically say, don't start your cycle that month. If there is no implantation, then notice how all these hormones begin to go down, begin to go down, begin to go down. When these hormones go down, that triggers the beginning of menstruation for that month, and she starts the cycle all over again. So, to sum up, ovulation occurs day 14. That's when a mature oocyte is released, and then in the next day or two or three, there better be fertilization. If not, the oocyte cuts off, cannot be fertilized anymore, and she'll start her cycle anew. If she does have fertilization, then the implantation, if it occurs, is going to occur somewhere day 22, 23, 24, somewhere in there. The production, I'll do it one more time, the production of HCG, it actually stands for human chorionic gonadotropin. That hormone prevents the cycle from starting, and that really marks the beginning of her pregnancy. So I'll just show you this one more time to show you the walls of the uterus. The endometrium that I keep referring to for the lining, that's the innermost layer of the uterus, and that's what she will shed each month. So when she sheds, when she menstruates, she's going to shed that through her cervix into the vagina, and that's going to be the menstrual flow for that month. The myometrium is the muscle of the uterus, and when she goes into contractions, when she's pregnant and about to have a baby, that's what begins to squeeze to push the baby through the cervix and the vagina. Oops, let me do some erasing. Okay, just want to point out again a couple of basics here. The time from fertilization to birth is about 38 weeks. So they actually can calculate when a woman's supposed to have a baby based on the date of her last menstruation, therefore guessing when she ovulated and therefore coming up with an estimate. During this time, we're going to go from one fertilized egg to, you have these stages of what are called marulas and gastrulas, different stages. Eventually, we're going to go from a zygote, which is the first 8 weeks of development, into, a zygote at fertilization. An embryo is the first 8 weeks of development, and finally a fetus is from week 9 until she has the baby. Just to show you some basic progressions here, the first trimester, the first 12 weeks or so of the pregnancy, is when you're going to see a lot of organ development. The heart starts beating at day 24. The brain forms, the fingers form, the toes, ears, all the major organs form. The second trimester is really marked by a lot of growth. So is the third. A fetus is going to change considerably in size. And so the actual average birth weight of most babies is about 7 pounds. So from a single cell to 7 pounds, there's going to be a lot of growth that has to occur. Labor is brought out by a series of uterine contractions. So the uterus contracts, that myometrium contracts, and will push the baby out through a series of changes in the uterus and the cervix. Finally, I want to point out one more region here that's different in males and females. that deals more with postpartum. That is, after the delivery of the baby, the female has a unique role in that she's going to produce milk in the mammary glands to sustain the baby. I'll point out just a couple of parts here to you. One is that you see this yellow here is adipose tissue. It's fat. So much of the breast tissue actually is fat, and that's the biggest reason for differences in breast size. But you also will notice here that you have these lobes, and then it's a little hard to see here that within these you have alveoli. You have these little circles, and we're not going to delve into the details of this, but that's where you're actually going to have the milk producing glands. The milk is going to be released into these ducts and be accessible at the nipple. So when the baby begins to feed, it releases that milk and becomes available to it. She will produce milk as long as the baby is drawing milk down. Once the baby maybe reaches 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever age that she decides to stop breastfeeding, after several days, those milk glands become inactive and she will stop producing milk. So that's the basics for females. This has a lot of information here. You may want to go back and watch this video one more time, maybe two, so that you really are clear on all of the anatomy that we associate with females and reproduction. Thanks.